In the early 1980s, arcades had a problem. One of the biggest hits of all time, a game that basically printed money, needed a follow-up. Operators wanted it yesterday, players wanted it now, and the company that owned it, well, they hesitated. So a small third-party team did something you weren't supposed to do. They didn't pitch a sequel. They built an unauthorized upgrade, a better version you could slip into an existing machine. And somehow, that unauthorized upgrade became one of the most famous arcade sequels of all time. This is the story of the sequel that was never supposed to exist, and the weird chain of events that made it official. And the wildest part? The people who solved this problem weren't supposed to be anywhere near it. Here's the part people forget about arcade hits. A Smash success isn't just a win, it's a trap, because the next game has to do two very difficult things at once: feel instantly familiar and fresh at the same time. And if you get that wrong, you don't just disappoint people, you make the whole thing feel smaller. Now meanwhile, arcade operators weren't patient. They had rent to pay, they had floor space to fill, they had machines that needed to earn. So when a cabinet started cooling off, operators didn't hold a funeral. They looked for a fix, which leads to a very arcade-only reality. Operators own the hardware, and swapping parts, ROMs, boards, rules was a normal way to keep revenue alive. That whole ecosystem created an opening, because when an official sequel wasn't ready, someone else could fill the gap. Arcade history makes more sense when you realize this. A lot of cabinets weren't treated like sacred art. They were treated like vending machines. So an entire industry popped up around conversion kits, hardware tweaks that could turn one cabinet into something new without buying a whole new machine. And one of the boldest companies in that space was a young team out of Massachusetts called General Computer Corporation, or GCC. Now, depending on how you tell it, they were either clever engineers keeping arcades alive or extremely polite pirates. Either way, GCC had a reputation for pushing limits. And they were about to push the biggest limit of all. Because GCC wasn't just building a kit for any game, they were about to put their hands on the crown jewel. GCC's project had a name that sounds like a placeholder, because it basically was. They called it Crazy Otto, and the pitch wasn't let's reinvent this hit, it was let's fix it. So Crazy Otto did what sequels often struggle with. It added variety without changing the core feel. New level layouts, more unpredictable enemy patterns, and other upgrades to refresh the experience. The kind of changes that make your brain go, this feels familiar, but it's also different. I kinda dig it. And for the operators, that's gold, because freshness plus unpredictability sells more credits than just nostalgia. But there was a massive problem. GCC didn't own the game they were modifying. Before Crazy Otto, GCC had already been in trouble, legally. They had created an unauthorized conversion kit for Missile Command, and Atari did not take that lightly. Atari sued. And the lawsuit wasn't just about one game. It was about whether third-party companies had any right to modify arcade software and sell it as an upgrade. GCC eventually settled, but the message was clear. You can't just quietly ship modified versions of someone else's hits anymore. So when Crazy Otto came together, a smarter, more dynamic version of a game everyone recognized, GCC knew they couldn't release it the same way they had before. So the team had two options: either kill it or do something insane. They chose option 2. GCC did something unheard of. They took their project directly to Midway, the company responsible for distributing the original game Crazy Otto converted, which in hindsight was a bit like walking into a bank to negotiate a deal while holding money that was clearly stolen from their vault. Bold indeed. But they presented the problem simply. We built this to work with your game. It works, but we can't legally release it ourselves. Midway immediately understood what they were looking at. This wasn't a risky prototype, it wasn't a theory. It was already built, already fun, already earning imaginary quarters. And more importantly, it solved Midway's biggest problem. They needed a follow-up, right now. So instead of asking, Should we make a sequel? Midway asked a better question. Can we ship this? The answer was yes, so they acquired the game and made it official. The core gameplay stayed the same, but the presentation changed, new branding, a refined look, and a personality that made it feel intentional. Crazy Otto disappeared, and in its place, Midway presented the sequel the world had been waiting for. And that game was Ms. Pac-Man. Now here's the part that still feels unreal. Ms. Pac-Man was a 1982 arcade hit developed not by Namco, but by modding enthusiasts at GCC, and it became one of the most beloved sequels of all time. Now, in my opinion, Ms. Pac-Man succeeded for one simple reason. It didn't try to replace the original. It made the original last longer. And the improvements were exactly the kind that increased replayability, more variety, better AI, a sequel philosophy that many modern games still try to imitate. Same core, better gameplay. If you've ever wondered why Ms. Pac-Man feels like Pac-Man but better, it's because it literally started as Pac-Man but better. Now, in conclusion, here's the irony. One of the most beloved sequels in arcade history didn't come from a master plan. It came from people who weren't even supposed to be making it, solving a problem faster and better than anyone else could. Ms. Pac-Man didn't exist because someone asked permission. It existed because demand moved faster than approval. And sometimes, that's how a great idea becomes part of history. I want to know what you think. Which arcade sequels exceeded your expectations and which ones didn't? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this content, you know what to do. If you made it this far, thanks for watching, and happy gaming, my friends.